Your commission just launched the report Breaking the Holding Pattern. What is the central message, the key message you're trying to tell the government through the report?
Well, what we're trying to tell the government is that we spent a year talking with all sorts of people, the industry, people who fly, academics, NGOs who are campaigning, and the message that's coming over is nobody can agree about what the importance and the impact of flying is on the climate. And we need to get that evidence clear before the government starts taking decisions which are irreversible but will lock us into more flying in the future.
So the evidence and the arguments of the government are basically unknown or flawed even?
Yes, exactly. We think that's the case. So if you take it at a very practical level, my friend's teenage daughter is about to go off on her gap year and she's thinking of flying to New Zealand, and she's going to go to Australia and the Cook Islands. We all take this for granted now. So many of us want to fly all the time for pleasure, for business, to visit relatives in other countries, which is fine, except that's causing huge pressure in terms of the carbon dioxide emissions and the impact on climate change. So we have to decide in Britain how much of our carbon ration that we're going to have to live within in the future, in the next 50 years, how much of that ration is going on flying. Because we also want to get around, we want to heat our homes, we want food, which takes CO2 to produce, and we've got to make some choices.
Is it a problem that we see here? Is the economy facing the unknown factor of climate change? We don't know how bad it's going to get. Is that the issue, the central issue?
Well, we know a lot about how quickly climate change is developing now, and the fact that we're causing the problem, and we've got maybe much less than 10 years now to take some really drastic steps. People will argue that flying only contributes in Britain 6% of our CO2 emissions, but that overlooks two important facts. One is we're addicted to flying, we're doing more and more of it, so those emissions are going up all the time, and over the next few years that could go to be 50% of our carbon budget going on flying. The other issue is the CO2 that planes pump out in the high atmosphere causes more of a greenhouse effect than CO2 pumped out on the ground, because of the way it interacts in the atmosphere. You get these contrails from jet aircraft. Scientists will argue about this a lot, but most people would say it has at least twice the impact. So it's not just a ton of CO2 and its normal effect, it's actually doubled. So we need to do something about aviation, because also many countries in the world are also building up this idea that flying is the way to get about. In India, in Brazil, in China, it's not just the UK, it's not just Europe. So globally we have to do something about the growth in flying.
So from your point of view, your commission, the government is not taking the issue of climate change seriously enough. Would that be your conclusion?
It's taking the issue of climate change seriously, but it's got its head in the sand as concerns emissions from aviation. We can't continue as we are. And the thing is, there are lots of solutions to this. One is radically cleaner technology, which some of the aircraft companies are working on. One is the way we manage flying. Another one is alternatives. Why the hell are we flying from London to Manchester? There's a fast rail link, so don't fly where you don't need to. Another one is some of us are developing a habit of, you have the second home in France because you can fly there on a cheap airline. Those sorts of habits, if we establish them now, are going to go on for years. So there are lots of different ways of tackling this issue, because we're all going to want to fly. Flying will be an important part of society in the future, but we're going to have to do it within a carbon budget.
Right. So how do you think this report will impact the legislation of the government?
Well, what we're saying to the government is, first, people don't trust you and your information. Your information is out of date. It's effectively unsafe to base your future policies about runway expansion and so on this data. So set up an independent commission, a bit like the government did for pensions, which was very effective, and actually work out what the science is telling us and what to do about it, and get people involved with that. In the meantime, don't take decisions that are going to lock us into more and more air travel when there may be alternatives.
So basically get the evidence right and then take the decision.
Correct.
Another issue is global sustainability. I know the WWF, they just released a report that we are currently overconsumption, 25% of the planet, so basically we are living an unsustainable way. Is that the broader issue, what's actually going on here?
Yeah, I mean, this is the broader issue, and if you take climate change as the most, if you like, powerful example of how we're living beyond the limits of the planet at the moment, we all ultimately are going to have a carbon ration. Whether politicians like it or not now, by the time my children are 50 years old, carbon rationing will be normal. So we have to make some choices about how we want to live, what kind of homes we want to live in, how we want to travel, how our food's produced, how much flying we want to do within a carbon budget. And in many parts of the world, people desperately need to consume more to get out of poverty and to get a basic livelihood, which means in Europe and in the UK, we're going to have to find ways of living which put less impact on the environment. And some of those things can be creative, they can be fun, they can involve new design and new habits. It's not all pain and gloom, but we are going to have to live radically differently within a carbon budget.
So you're saying not only carbon tax, but you're actually saying carbon budget, that there will be a ceiling to individual use of carbon. That's where we're going.
That has to come, to be honest, because any other measure, we've got a finite amount of CO2 we can pump into the atmosphere without causing dangerous climate change. Currently, we're exceeding that limit, and we're going to keep on exceeding that limit unless we change our habits. So the science is telling us there is a limit per year to how much CO2 we can put into the atmosphere, and we've got to find a way of sharing out that ration effectively. There is a real limit here.
Yeah, like polluting the streams, there's a limit there as well. We figured that out, and then we set targets and legislation. Is the government ready for this? How long will this take?
I think the governments are, they kind of have two views on this, like all human beings do. One view, a lot of the people in government do understand this very well, they've got the science, they know there's a problem, but then politics kicks in, because nobody likes to give the unpopular message. And the issue at the moment is, it's not just government, it's also business, and it's all of us as citizens. It's, are we going to move together to solve this problem? Or is each corner of that triangle going to blame the other one? So Will will say the government should do more, government will say the business should have greener products, business will say the consumers aren't asking for greener products, they want to fly more, they don't want to use the alternatives. So it's going to have to be action by all three. And we often say government should lead, and that's quite true, but governments have to lead in a way that they'll get public support, which is why it's so important that politicians hear from people who are going to vote that they think these issues are important, and they will actually vote for politicians who put them at the top of their priority list.
So any person writing the minister and saying, "Dear Minister, I really would like you to take this issue seriously," that does help. Any letter.
Absolutely vital. Absolutely vital. And 10 letters in the or 10 emails to an MP is equivalent to hundreds of comments. They know that this represents something.
They read the emails, or the secretary reads. It does get transformed. It does get transferred.
And for someone to make the personal effort to communicate directly with their politicians, saying, "I think this is important. I want to see you putting it at the top of the agenda."
So you're saying to the government, hold on, let's wait a minute here. Let's wait till we know for sure the impact and the damage of the airport expansion. What's the economic cost of waiting?
Well, some parts of business will tell you it will be devastating for the UK if we don't build the third runway at Heathrow. But we think this is nonsense, frankly. First of all, the runway expansion at Heathrow is only one part of looking at all of the network of airports that we have around the UK. There may be a much stronger case, for instance, in terms of regional airports. The main reason for expanding the runway is to keep transfer traffic in Heathrow as an international hub. We don't think, and in fact Bob Ayling, former chairman of BA, doesn't think that brings much economic benefit to the UK. And what will be disastrous for the UK is if we build our economy round a pattern of aviation which is completely unsustainable in the long term. And don't forget, aviation benefits the economy, nobody's disputing that, but it also has big costs in the sense that a lot of us then travel abroad, spend our money abroad, so there are costs and benefits. And in fact, this issue of what's the benefit and what's the cost is one of the biggest areas of dispute at the moment, and we do need to understand it a bit better before racing ahead too quickly.
Yeah, and obviously also need to understand the future, slowdown of the economy, business people saying that they will use video conferencing, and changes coming to the way we actually travel in the future.
Yes,
that's part of it too.
Many businesses would far rather, it's cheaper for them, it's more convenient for their employees, they get to spend more time with their families, far rather use these new technologies as they become available than sending people travelling around the world all the time.
Cost efficiency.
Not very effective way of doing business.
Yeah, okay. What do you think needs to happen for everybody to get along, government, private sector and public sector, to actually take things seriously and really start acting fast?
I think the key thing is, first of all, to understand this is a global problem and it's something that's happening right now. All around the world, people are now being impacted by climate change. Very often the poorest and the most vulnerable people are being impacted, but we're seeing the change even in weather patterns here in Britain. So it's understanding the urgency. It's understanding that this is not a little problem. This is not something we can deal with a few low energy light bulbs. It does mean quite a profound change in how we live. But a lot of those changes could be good. They could be changes about building better communities, we could have better social structure, more creative and interesting jobs, new technologies. This is not about going back to the Dark Ages, but it is about quite a radical change in how we live.